with Matt commentary. Also with me is Bob. How you doing today, Bob?
I'm doing just fine, Mac. Thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Today we're going to talk to my guests out there. I want to say welcome, and we've got a good show here for you today. It's not. I don't call it a show. I want to call it an information. I guess we could call it a show, information show, something that you can learn a lot about what's going on here with the reparation movement here and what's happening. And just gonna try to give you a little history on this as well. In the past, we've known that 6 times they say victims have received reparations, and a lot of people don't think we deserve reparations, and and uh, and I can't understand why they don't, why they think like that. But many of you remember Ta-Nehisi Coates' long, deeply research and case for reparation that he gave to the Congress some time ago. I believe it was back in 2014 or 2015. And he talked about reparations for African Americans for slavery and Jim Crow, which we've talked about as well, Bob, as you may know. We have said that people that experience just as much terrorism during Jim Crow era as they did during the slavery. Now, we're going to talk today about what exactly the U.S. government owes to a population it abused for centuries and which still faces pervasive discrimination and economic disadvantages to this day. To look back on some of the reparation that's been given, there are some programs that were set by Germany to compensate victims of the Holocaust, by South Africa to compensate victims of the apartheid, by the U.S. to compensate victims of Japanese internment during World War II, by the state of North Carolina to compensate victims of its forced sterilization programs in the mid-20th century, and by the federal government to compensate victims of the Tuskegee experiment. And finally, also, Florida compensated victims of the Rosewood race riot of 1923. Now, looking at the Holocaust, the closest analog to reparation for slavery and Jim Crow is probably the reparation that West Germany agreed to pay after the Holocaust. A major component was the $7 billion, that's in 2014 dollars, West Germany agreed to give to the then young state of Israel. Now, Ta-Nehisi Coates goes into the Israeli debate around the reparations in some detail. Menachem Begin, then the leader of Israel's conservative opposition and later its first right of center prime minister, opposed the deal on the grounds that it appeared to give Germany in exchange for money. But the deal eventually went through, and the consequences for Israel's well-being were astounding. Now, here's what Ta-Nehisi Coates stated, and I quote, he said, by the end of 1961, these reparation vessels constituted 2/3 of the Israeli merchant fleet, writes the Israeli historian Tom Segev in his book, The Seventh Million. From 1953 to 1963, the reparation money funded about 1/3 of the total investments in Israel's electrical system, which tripled its capacity, and nearly half the total investment in the railways. Israel's GNP tripled during the 12 years of the agreement. The Bank of Israel attributed 15% of this growth, along with 45,000 jobs, to investment made with reparations money. But that's only a tiny fraction of Germany's total reparation payments, which totaled nearly $89 billion as 2012, and largely went to individual survivors. The terms of the reparation, most of which are negotiated by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims against Germany, which negotiated about $70 billion of the total, are constantly evolving, with some payments made on a one-time basis and others on monthly pensions of varying amounts. The conference has a good breakdown of the various funds and how much they are paid out. Now that's good to know, no doubt about that. And then we have the apartheid in South Africa right there. Now they only gave out like $85 billion, and something is, when you look at this here, Bob, there's in 2003 in South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, he was the president at that time, announced in 2003 he would authorize only $85 billion to be given in one-time payments of $3,900 above the average annual salary in the country at that time. These recipients numbered 16,397 as of 2012, which was a tiny fraction of the actual number of people victimized by the regime. Now, Bob, there's like 48 million people in South Africa, that, and only about 100,000 of those people represent whites, as I believe I read that correctly. So you can see there that we have people in this country who thinks along those same lines as this Mbeki, who's also a Black South African, who didn't want to give out the money to the people that deserved it, to the masses of people that went through the apartheid during that time period and lived in those shanty towns over there. So we have people right here in America who are the same way, that feel the same way. And we have one gentleman by the name of, I believe his name is Glenn Lowry, and going back in 2001, where he had a debate with a gentleman by the name of Hitchens. And this was some time ago, about 23 years ago. But still, his idea for reparations was that he didn't think Blacks needed to be paid money. So let's listen to that, Bob, for a few minutes here and see what he's talking about, and then and we'll bring in some other things as well.
Thank you. I rise to address the question, should the U.S. pay reparations for slavery? I'm going to argue in the negative on that question. I take no pleasure in doing so. Would that I would be somewhere else tonight than here before you arguing the negative of this question. I am not without sympathy for the arguments that just have been presented. I mean, how could it be otherwise? I am a descendant of slaves. I recognize that we have a past that needs to be reckoned with. But the payment of reparations to African Americans for the wrongs of that past is the wrong way to reckon with it. I say that for three reasons. It's bad social ethics. Bad social ethics. It is bad racial politics. Bad racial politics. And it averts our attention from the most profound issues with which, if we do not reckon, we're never going to put that past behind us. Now, let's deal with the social ethics. The tort law model that is implicit in the reparations claim. Party A injures Party B. Party B sues Party A. Party A pays Party B. Is the wrong model for thinking about this problem. If I was talking about somebody who carelessly let their automobile roll down the garage driveway and run into the automobile of someone else, then we're talking let's get paid. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the desecration of the most important ideals that this country has advanced. I'm talking about a nation founded on the notion that all men are created equal and endowed, so forth and so on, that nevertheless countenance the institution of traffic and human chattel. That is a monumental crime, the magnitude of which is diminished into something picayune by saying that it's about money. It is not about money. What it's about is whether or not we are going to rise and be the people whom we have always proclaimed ourselves to be. And let me tell you, folks, you cannot put a price tag on that. The African-American family, more than 60% of black children are born out of wedlock. That has got something to do with the fact that men and women could be ripped from the moorings of their familial bond and sold away as if they were property, as if they were horses, under the institution of slavery. That's not a small thing. It's a big thing. You want me to monetize that? $10,000 a head times 30 million people, that's $300 billion, and then we're done with it? No, not on my watch. It's serious business, as my erstwhile worthy opponent has said. It is serious business, too serious to be put down on somebody's paycheck. It's bad social ethics. Us versus them. They got hurt, we're going to pay them. This is not about black people and white people, human beings. This is about human beings. This is about America. I don't want a contested, legalized, us-them reduction of this problem. I want us to understand that the stakes here are stakes for everybody. We're all on the same side. It's bad social ethics. It is bad racial politics. It is bad racial politics. I am so tired of the politics of symbolism substituting for a substantive building of progressive coalitions in African-American political experience that I did not know what to do. The nation is moving forward. We are a forward-looking people. 30 million immigrants come to our shores since 1965. They and their children are a part of the national story, too. How can we address the problems that continue to plague us, that derive from this outrageous history, without real political coalitions prepared to enact into law the myriad statutes that will be necessary with respect to health care, with respect to education, with respect to housing, with respect to doing something about the blight of our inner cities? How are those laws actually going to be passed unless majorities can be formed that are prepared to affirm them? Those majorities need to be given a narrative, a story, an account of what we are about. And I fear that the reparations construction is woefully inadequate to provide such an account. We need a common narrative of national obligation. That's the only way that black education is going to improve. That's the only way that the quality of life for poor black children in inner cities is going to be made better. A common narrative onto which at least 51% of the electorate is prepared to sign about national obligation. You cannot get there from here with the reparations argument. It's bad politics. It is a diversion from the real issues. As I said, we need political coalition. As I have said, we need to garner the support of new Americans who simply can't buy into this old argument as theirs. We need to recognize that even if African Americans were to prevail in the reparations claim, even if we were to get paid, even if we were to get the check, we could still lose. Consider the American who sits in the suburbs somewhere who is approached with the problems of 1.2 million black young men under lock and key on a given day, and on the day after reparations checks have gone out saying, oh yeah, well, you people have been paid. Consider the rural American resident who's approached with the problem of life expectancy of African Americans 10 years shorter than that of white Americans, for all manner of reasons having to do both with the way in which healthcare is delivered and the general factors of our society that affect the quality of life of people of color. And that person says, yes, interesting point, but you know what? You Negroes have been paid. Consider the person, perhaps a recent citizen to the country, who is informed about the fact that African-American 17-year-olds in this country read and compute at the level of white American 13-year-olds, a 4-year gap in educational accomplishment by the time they're 17. And that person says, it's an interesting point, but you know what? Those checks just went out. You people have been paid. What I'm saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, and the reason that I urge you to support me, is that precisely because this is a serious matter, precisely because the possibility that our country will not live up to its most cherished ideals is very real, precisely because a history of oppression, degradation, racism has left very real consequences in its train, precisely because there are millions of people whose lives are yet to be blessed with the riches and the potentiality that this society holds so dear. For precisely that reason, we should not go down the reparations road. Because you know what? As long as it's possible to put a color on those faces of despair that look up at us from the bottom rungs of American society, the debt will be outstanding. Let us not close the door on our national obligation the easy way. Let us not buy ourselves out of this problem with 1 year's worth of military budget expenditures. Let us not let ourselves off the hook by converting what is a sacred civic obligation as yet unmet into the profane currency of greenbacks. Let's be serious about dealing with our past. Let's not talk about reparations. Let's talk about justice, and let's mean it. Thank you.
Okay, Bob. Now we heard what Glenn Lara had to say. How do you, what do you think about his particular expressions there that blacks should not receive any monetary value for reparations?
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that Mbeki from South Africa is the same guy that they busted from stealing from his people when he was the president. So put that into the hopper as well. He didn't go to prison, but he was a thief nonetheless.
And he's worth today $10 million, Bob.
Huh?
And I believe he's worth about $10 million.
Right, that he stole.
Yeah.
Okay, so but to get back to the point, see, these thieves, they don't want to give back the money for the people that they stole from, because many of those people that he stole from are walking around in bare feet. But that's another question. But to go back to the point, you know, that just shows me the difference in the Caucasoid and the Negroid. Negroids can be very niggardly, niggardly, when it comes to money. Niggardly. They don't want to give up the money to somebody that it could help. You look at what those Jews did. They passed that money around, and look how it influenced the overall economy in their country, because they were not niggardly in the use of those funds. Now, let's fast forward to today. Just last week, on the 17th of this year, a Congress lady by the name of Cori Bush, has just put into the House a bill, HR414, which would give reparations to Black people, slave descendants in America. What does that mean? It means that if you look at the $14 billion attached to HR 414, that would amount, using 40 million as the number of slave descendants in America, that would amount to about $350,000 per descendant. I would say that while that's not a lot of money, it's a significant sum. And with that money, you could do much the same thing in America for descendants of slaves, what the Jews did in Africa by expanding their GDP. But you got these niggardly Negroids who don't want to do that. They want to keep us at the end of a chain like a fire madam with a ring between our nose. And that's a tragedy. But I'm not going to stay with this negativity. This is my suggestion, because this is what I plan to do Monday morning, tomorrow morning. Cori Bush has introduced HR414, and it has been pushed to the Judiciary Committee for evaluation, and then it'll go to a budget for a markup as to how much money ultimately it costs. But she has proposed 14 trillion. I said billion. I mean $14 trillion with a T. And this is what she's only got 9 sponsors. And think about that. I think there's about 50 or so black Congress people in the Congress right now. And here this lady puts forward a bill that will benefit 40 million black people in America, and she can only get 9 sponsors. Well, that's beyond the point. The point is this. I intend, and my Congress lady, Miss Tlaib, I've never contacted her before, but I intend to call her Monday morning. And I would suggest that your listeners, Mac, look up Cori Bush and find out if their congressperson sponsored her on that bill. Perhaps they may have been, but even if they weren't, call them up and say, look, I'd like to get a copy of HR414, because it's not very long. It's only 23 pages. The significance of it is that this is the first time in history that a bill has been put into the Congress with a dollar attached to it, a dollar amount attached to it. Right. $14 trillion. Get that and read it. And then let's start a movement in America among 40 million blacks. I mean, while I say $350,000 is not a lot of money, but I could use it, you know? I'm sure there's a lot of us out here that could use that $350,000. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to take the money. You know, right. Maybe I'm renting an old rundown apartment. That $350,000 might buy me, as you were saying the other day, Mac, a bungalow for $250,000, and that'll still leave me $100,000 to put furnishings in it.
Right.
So I would suggest this, because I'm telling you, this is what I intend to do. I intend to call my Congress lady, Miss Tlaib, and say, Madam, I'm grateful that you are sponsoring Cori Bush legislation, HR414, for reparations. And I intend to support you and anybody else that will support this legislation. Let's get it passed. Let's give it serious consideration, because this is the first time in my lifetime that I've seen a piece of legislation with a dollar amount attached to it that would say, look, we're going to give every black $350,000 once this legislation passes and the president signs it. And that's a lot more than those $1,200 checks they passed out. And people use that during COVID. That helped a lot of people. I think this $350,000 will help a lot more people. So that's my spiel on this back.
Well,
This guy Lowry and people like him that don't want to give registration. I don't know what their motives are, and I'm not gonna question their motives. Maybe they don't need the money. Maybe they're so wealthy that $350,000 don't mean anything to them, but it means a lot to me,
well,
and I think it
one
means a
of
lot to
one of the
many black people.
well, one of the things he brought out in that Glenn did in his particular debate there was that that blacks are in prisons, blacks are the undereducation of the youth, where they can't read, that they're like 4 or 5 years behind the whites in reading, the internment of them in jails and prisons and everything, and their health, and blight in the inner cities. Bob, that's been over 23 years that he talked about that. How long has all these things been going on? In many cities, they've gotten even worse. Now, if these people had this $350,000, I mean, if most people had it, everybody, they're going to do, some going to be most going to be quite responsible with that money. Some going to do whatever they want to. And what are we to say? Whatever they want to do with it. That's their inheritance. How about these people who inherit money from their families and they go out there and they blow it? So if that's what these people want to do, they can do it. But one of the significant things about the bill that you spoke of, Bob, is that the resolution in itself explores the history of enslaved Africans dating back to 1565, and it notes that many of the early presidents of the U.S. enslaved black people. And Miss Bush was standing outside of the Capitol. She told ABC News her resolution doesn't shy away from the history of the nation's capital,
That's right.
stating that the White House and the Capitol were both built from the labor of enslaved black people. And she further stated that the U.S. benefited from over 222 million hours of forced slave labor, or the equivalent of roughly $97 trillion. That's with a T, Bob, worth of work between 1619 and 1965 during the end of slavery. The resolution estimates. But unlike the white enslavers, Bush notes, those who were stripped of their dignity and made to work without compensation, they weren't repaid. And and that is so true, Bob, and that continued on past slavery into the Jim Crow era, where blacks, really were not paid the same wages as their white counterparts, nor were they given the opportunities to get 160 acres out west. They wouldn't give blacks that the opportunity, but they gave that property to the white immigrants that came over from Europe. They gave them all that land. That was reparations to them. But blacks couldn't get that land. So we are, and black folks, you have to wake up. We are due our reparations now. And we must, as Bob so eloquently stated, we must call our representatives and demand that they back this bill, HR414. Is that correct, Bob?
That's correct.
And also, I understand that Ms. Bush bill follows a similar bill from Representative Barbara Lee, Democrat.
That's right.
California.
That's right.
And that was introduced on Thursday as well, right, Bob?
That's right, Mac. And you're right on it, brother. Let me tell you this. If we, as black people in America, miss this opportunity, This is a moment in history. I mean, it's, and I don't like to make this comparison, but it's something that will be with us for the rest of our lives. It's kind of like when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. got assassinated. It's that kind of a moment in history. It was like when Bobby Kennedy got assassinated, and it was like when the president of these United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, got assassinated. It's a moment in history that will affect the lives of Americans 100,000 years from now. So I would implore, I would almost beg any of your listeners, get on the phone tomorrow and call your representative and say, look, did you or do you? Because I need to know this. I voted for you. And I need to know whether or not you're going to support me in this that I need. There's a bill that represent your counterpart, Representative Cori Bush, has put on the floor, and it's been going before the Judiciary Committee, HR414, and I would like for you to vote for that. As a matter of fact, call her office and see if you can sponsor it.
Right.
Be one of the sponsors, because she's only got 9 sponsors, and there's only 50 or 60 Black people in the Congress right now. I would think that at least they would all be sponsoring it. But it's like you were saying the other day, Mac. It's, oh no, I represent all the people. Well, if you represent all the people, here's an opportunity for you to step out for a moment and represent your people and see if the rest of the people that you represent will also support your people. Because you've been supporting all the people. Why not you support Negroid people for one time? Because Negroids have been supporting Caucasoids. We support and have continued to support time after time as Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. And I sometimes question whether I'm an American, but I don't want to get off into that. If I can support a Caucasoid president time and time again, can't you just one time support a Negroid proposal that might help your fellow American? Let's do it, people.
Well, you know, Bob, there's 62 Black Congress people, at least, I mean, approximately 62, out in which they represent about 11% of the congressional body. And I mean, that's a significant number of people that can get behind this bill. But why is it that we only have 9? I don't understand. I mean, that's a little more than 10%, Bob. And but you know, getting back to Representative Barbara Lee and trying to equate some of these things that Laurie was talking about, that instead of getting a paycheck, we should be thinking about the jails, the people in our Blacks in jail, the education system, and the health and the blight and all of that. What she has proposed in her bill, which was reintroduced on Thursday, which called for the creation of the United States Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. That bill, Lee said, will create a commission that will examine the effects of slavery, institutional racism, and discrimination against people of color. And she should have said Black people. I don't know why they're going to throw all these people of color in there. And how our history impacts laws and policies today. You see, one of the things Blacks always want to do is be all inclusive, when all these people were not inclusive as slaves. So how can we make them inclusive now on the benefits or the reparations that we get for slavery, or that we are demanding, should I say? So what Bush and Lee's bill aimed is to be companions to the House HR House of Representatives Bill 40. I think that's the one that Conyers first made that bill back in the late 90s. Isn't that right, Bob?
1989, HR 40.
Law
And you're,
1989. That's correct.
you're right about that.
It
And
was
the reason that it was called HR 40, because the 40 was symbolic of the 40 acres that General, oh, I forget the general's name, but anyway, his field order 15.
General Grant. Oh no,
No, Sherman,
Sherman.
William,
Yeah.
Sherman, William T. Sherman. I remembered it back.
Yeah.
My Alzheimer's isn't completely gone yet, but anyway, William T. Sherman, 15, field order 15, where he said that he took 400,000 acres of land and said he was going to give that to 10,000 freed slaves. And when President Lincoln got assassinated, this slave owner, Andrew Johnson, one of those presidents that you were talking about earlier, that owned slaves, he owned slaves, over 200 slaves. And so what he did, he rescinded the general's field order 15 and said, no, we're not giving these Negroids nothing. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna get the land back to the slave owners, and that's what he did. And he was the president of the United States who took over after President Lincoln was assassinated.
Right. Well, you know, the demand for reparations, Bob, go back all the way back to 1783 when Belinda Sutton, I guess she may have been a Royale because Isaac Royale, she petitioned the state of Massachusetts for 50 years of slavery to Isaac Royale, who had fled to Canada after the American Revolution because he had sided with the British. And,
Yes.
So we have people demanding reparation for slavery going all the way back into that time period, Bob. And
Yes.
And we also had James Foreman. Now you spoke about Conyers there with the 40 acres and a mule with the field order number 15. But James Foreman, you may recall James Foreman.
He was a friend of mine.
Yeah, back in 1969 at the Riverside Church in New York, he demanded $500 million for reparations.
That's right.
So, I mean, we've been, this is something that we've been, it's been demanded for a long time. And a lot of people, younger people today, they don't understand. I mean, they may experience some things today, some of the remnants of slavery and Jim Crow, but they don't understand how it is to have lived in the Jim Crow era, and as well as doing the slavery. I don't know how it was doing slavery, but I can imagine if it was anything worse than Jim Crow, I can imagine what it was like. So I'm just saying here, Bob, is that with these Bush and Lee's bill, what they aim to do is be a companion to the HR 40, which was a commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans Act. That bill was named, as you stated, for a promise made shortly after the end of the Civil War, where Union leaders promised formerly enslaved families 40 acres and a mule, a promise that was never fulfilled. So it's been, HR 40 has been introduced in every legislature session since 1989. Now we must now, as you go back, you talk about 1989, that's 30 years, what is that, 33 years almost, Bob, right?
Yeah, right, 34 years. That's right.
And some of these people talk about, oh, we got to change this, we got to do that. Just give, what they used to, what's that guy that says, show me the money. And then we can make our own changes. But I think that though with the reparation study and some of the things that Lee asked for in her bill that would examine the effects of slavery, institution, racism, and discrimination against Black people, is that there'll be some things that will come out of that of this whole thing here with the studies and everything, is to try to define some of the key things. It's been suggested that perhaps instead of along with the money, that Blacks can be given their own state. But I don't know whether that's feasible or not. Anything is feasible, but Blacks can be given free education, no taxes on earnings for the next 100 years or whatever.
Free, and no taxes on the $350,000.
Exactly, and maybe that'll make some rights up. In free education, I mean, to go to any state institution that they desire. And I think that having something like this, Bob, along with the coming up with a plan to give out cash money, will be an equitable solution to many of the problems that Blacks are facing in America.
That's right. That's right. And think of this too, Mac. I would assume that those prisoners that Lowry was talking about, those guys are descendants of slaves as well.
Exactly.
And so they would get their $350,000 checks as well. And probably a lot of them would be able to buy their way out of prison, because then they could get good legal representation. I imagine there's probably a lot of brothers behind bars who were falsely accused. You
exactly.
See how these police treat I just can't get that picture out of my mind. Shoot a brother 46 times, man, for a traffic violation. And so if they don't do that, shoot a man 46 times, what will they do to put him behind bars so that they don't get their fingers tainted? You know,
they lie and cheat and place drugs on them, contraband or whatever sort they can, and so they can get and build up their arrest records. A lot of them do that, you know, and it's no longer a secret that they do that.
Yes.
So but the key thing is, when those brothers do get out of prison, they won't have to go back to the life of crime in order to survive, because nobody will give them a job. They will have some money to be in. Many of those guys are pretty smart, Bob.
That's right. And they'll be able to start their own legitimate business.
That's right. And that's what we should all be going to bat for, you know, to help all the downtrodden people in our race, which we are downtrodden and oppressed people. And no matter how many of us rise up to the top, as they say about cream, there are so many still stuck at the bottom, Bob. And and those at the top who don't want others to come up, then shame on you. Shame
That's right.
on you. That's all I have to say on that. And just think of how many youth can get a much better education if they got this type of free education, or $350,000 or whatever, free education plus $150,000, or whatever the amount comes out to be. It can benefit our people, Bob. It can get us out of this here. And say 10% of the people that get this money decide they want to invest in a country in Africa. They could do that, you know?
Right. Oh, sure.
And help that country become more powerful. Just think what $1 trillion would do for invested in a country like Ghana or Sierra Leone or Kenya or any other of those countries over there. Just think what that could do and get that country going.
Absolutely.
And make that country become a leader, and that country can then push to unite all the 54 states of Africa into one United States of Africa.
Yes.
And that's going to help the future generations of blacks in this country, Bob, because when you look and see that you got a powerful home, so-called a land that you came from, whether indirectly or however, but you know that that's where your parents and foreparents came from, how much incentive and emboldened that will do for you or for
That's
them.
right. That's right. It'll be inspirational on a race basis. And back, that's why I implore you with your commentary to say to your listeners, get out there as you've already done, but just continue doing it, because you've got a very powerful show that goes all over the world. And these people need to listen to what you're saying. Tell them, if you're an American, if you are a Negroid American, a descendant of an African, get on the phone tomorrow, or if you don't have a telephone, write a letter or get a friend of yours to get on the phone and call your representative and let's start a movement of 40 million descendants of slaves in America to get in touch and get behind HR414 and Miss Barbara Lee's bill out of California. Think of these two representatives, two black women for that matter, Barbara Lee out of California and Cori Bush out of Missouri. Support them. And I don't care whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, or a communist, or whatever you are. If you're black, you ought to get behind these bills, because it's going to benefit you and your family into the future, just as Mac is telling you it will.
If you're black, don't stand back. Get up front and fight.
Yes, absolutely.
And do
don't
as
stand
and
back.
I think
Get up front.
I think
that's
Bob
a good
has
catchy phrase, Mac. If you're black, don't stand back. Get up front with 414.
Right. That's it. And we're gonna keep that going, Bob, because we got to get people out here motivated to understand that this is crucial to the survival of the black people in America. If not, you're gonna be buried, people. Look around you and see what's happening. Look at your borders and see what's happening. You will be buried. Get on board. Contact your Congress people now, not tomorrow, but now.
If you're black, don't get back. Step up front to 414. I think you hit it on the head, man.
I think you got it, Bob. Okay, I want to thank all the people for listening and tuning in today, and let's get on top of this. Let's write our Congress people and tell them if they're not on board, we're not voting for them anymore. And that's the way it has to go. And Bob, I want to thank you again for a great show today and great information. And thank you. And people, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because we need to get the word out. It's not for me, it's for you, it's for our grandkids, our great-grandkids. That's what this is all about. Thank you and have a great day.